Hello, I'm Michael Holmes, freelance journalist specialized in global violence and modern history. It's my great pleasure to talk to Feroze Sidhwa. Feroze, you are a trauma surgeon in California, and you've been to the Gaza Strip 2 times to work there as a volunteer doctor in Khan Yunis, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah, you've also been 3 times in Ukraine and in Burkina Faso, Haiti, Zimbabwe, I think.
Hmm.
All right. And we can talk a little bit about that maybe later. But today we want to focus on Gaza because
Hmm.
what you experienced there shocked you personally and later many other people because you and then later many of your colleagues there, meaning other volunteer workers, volunteer doctors and nurses in Gaza, were witness to Israeli soldiers shooting Palestinian children in the head and in the left chest, suggesting that maybe not in every single case, but in many of these cases, deliberately murdering children. And we're not just talking about adolescents who may sometimes participate in violence and throw Molotov cocktails or whatever, which often happen in the West Bank. Not to be confused with that. We're talking about little children under the age of 12 who certainly are not able to carry a gun or use it in any way. So that is it is a terrifying story. There have been questions around it, and I'm sure you can answer to those. And there has been, I was very happy to see that, a New York Times article on it, on your reports and those of, I think, around 60 of your colleagues,
Correct.
of whom I think 50 or so reported seeing similar cases of children being shot in the head and in the chest. I'm repeating myself, but that's on purpose because people really need to realize what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And some of them, there was a small minority of around 10 of your colleagues didn't see that. In
Hmm.
some cases, because they weren't working in children hospitals or, they didn't, that was not their job. But in other cases, they just said, no, I didn't experience that. But the vast majority
Hmm.
actually had similar horrifying experiences. So I would like us to focus on that first, on the evidence for Israeli soldiers deliberately targeting children. And of course, I would also like to talk about Israeli soldiers deliberately targeting hospitals, medical staff, and ambulances. And then maybe also you can compare a little bit what is happening in Gaza to Ukraine and other places you've visited. And yeah, and I think there's also a very interesting personal story because just to point it out, if people haven't, thought about it this way, you basically risk your life to save other people's lives. So something whatever people think about what you're saying, should really appreciate. So I also want to say thank you for that. And thank you for being to talking to us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, just to start with the first thing. So like you said, I've been in Gaza twice. The first time was in Khan Yunis at the European Hospital, which is on the eastern edge of the city, um, from March 25th to April 8th of 2024. And when I was there, like you mentioned, I was seeing a large number of kids shot in the head. I try to be as conservative about this as possible. So I kept a journal while I was there, and in that journal, I recorded 13 cases of, again, like you said, pre-teenage children shot in the head or the chest, and uh, and these were single shootings. These weren't the kid wasn't riddled with bullets and they had a bullet in their head. This was just a single shot to the head or the chest. In one case that I can remember right now, to both. But I try to be as careful as I can and just report on what I can what I actually wrote down that I saw. Now there were whole days at European Hospital where like I had one pair of gloves or even no gloves. And so I was just running around the emergency room with my hands caked in other people's blood. So I couldn't even like pull my phone out to record what I had seen. Not on video, but just to write down what I had seen. So there probably were plenty of others that I saw as well. But regardless of that, in 13 days, I recorded 13 days of clinical work. I saw 13 children, small children who had been shot in the head. So now I want to be as clear as I can about what I think that means. And I'm not a military expert, so if somebody were to tell me differently, I'm very happy to listen. But I want to be clear about what I think that means. When if you had or sorry, actually, and it's not just me. I should preface it, or like you mentioned already, Michael. The I After I got back, I started talking to other healthcare workers who'd been in Gaza, and most of them had seen the same thing. They'd seen small children, pre-teenage children shot in the head or the chest on a regular, or if not daily basis. And actually, if people are interested, there's another podcast called This American Life that just did a pretty deep dive into this just on Sunday, talking to me and some other people. And they actually found an Israeli soldier whose testimony is very, very interesting if people are interested in listening to it. But then I wrote a letter to the Biden administration that me and 44 other healthcare workers who've worked in Gaza signed. And what we said is we laid out the things that we had seen in Gaza: the widespread shooting of children in the head or chest, the malnutrition, children dying of easily preventable diseases, women, especially pregnant women, severely malnourished, still having stillbirths, being unable to breastfeed their newborns, and then their newborns dying as well. These sorts of things that we had seen. And so I sent that letter, I think it was July 25th of last year. If anybody wants to read them, they're at gazahealthcareletters.org. Nobody makes any money off that website or anything, but they're at that website if anybody wants to read them. So after that, I thought honestly that there would be a media kerfluffle about that. I thought that there would be some media interest in the fact that 45 American healthcare workers were saying publicly that they saw an American ally killing small children with American weapons. There was actually zero, like literally zero interest from corporate media. I talked to plenty of people in Europe, actually. So because it's not like this actually went viral on Twitter for obvious reasons. So I talked to plenty of people in Europe. I talked to the BBC, but there was zero interest from the United States zero interest from corporate media in the United States with literally one exception and only one exception, which was the New York Times opinion board, which I thought was pretty interesting. I would not have expected that if you had asked me what was going to happen. So they reached out and they said, what we want to do, and I thought this was sensible. What we want to do is poll American healthcare workers who've been in Gaza and ask them, did you see this specific? Because if you sign a letter, you just have to sign it or not sign it. You can't say, oh well, this applies to me, but that doesn't apply to me. But I want to sign the letter because it's an important letter. That's just natural for anybody who's ever signed a letter of protest. That's how it works. Otherwise, everybody would have to write their individual letters, and that doesn't have the same impact. So when we got so I did that. So I found an additional 20. So it was 65 healthcare workers and plus me, or 65 healthcare workers including me. So I pulled them and I said, did you see small children shot in the head or the chest on a regular basis? Did you see starvation affecting patients? Did you see newborns who died of malnutrition? Mostly the things that we talked about in the letter. And so I don't remember the exact numbers now, but so someone can forgive me if I'm wrong. You can read it at the New York Times website. I believe, if I remember correctly, that 53 out of the 65 healthcare workers worked in the appropriate setting, meaning the emergency room, the operating room, the ICU. And of those 53, 44, again, if I have the numbers wrong, please, I hope someone will forgive me for that, but this is approximately correct. Of those 53, 44 said, yes, I saw children shot in the head on a regular, if not daily basis. And, excuse me. Now, I already knew that that was going to be the case because the whole reason I was doing this is because I had talked to so many people who had told me themselves that they had seen this. And the reason I wanted to focus on that, there's plenty of other stuff in the Times piece and in the letters, but the reason I wanted to focus on that was because it really illustrates, forgive me, it really illustrates what the Israeli attack on Gaza. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Excuse me. It really illustrates what the U.S. Israeli attack on Gaza is. There might be some component of fighting Hamas. That's, I mean, I don't doubt that.
Yeah,
I'm sure the Israelis would like to get rid of Hamas, but that does not
of course.
explain what we saw there.
Mhm.
How, because could one child be injured in a crossfire or just shot by some sadistic soldier or shot by some crazed Hamas lunatic who says, oh, this is how I'm going to solve the Israel-Palestine conflict, by convincing Feroze Sidhwa that children are being shot in the head. All of that is possible to explain one kid, two kids, five kids, 10 kids. It does not explain how in the catchment area of every hospital in the Gaza Strip for more than a year at that point, on a regular, if not daily basis, a small child is being shot in the head. It doesn't explain that pattern. It just doesn't. The explanation, and I was actually kind of glad to see, or glad to hear, I just mentioned that This American Life podcast. There was the producers of that show found an Israeli soldier to interview about this, and his
Mhm.
conclusion was basically the exact same as mine. He didn't accuse us of lying, which I thought was very interesting. Actually, he didn't
Yeah.
accuse us of lying. He didn't say that's not true. There's no way. He did say he never saw that himself, which I completely believe,
Mhm.
because I don't. It's certainly not every Israeli soldier. It's probably the tiniest minority of soldiers, but it is
Yeah.
very clear that with the longevity and intensity and magnitude of this pattern, and the fact that it's perfectly public now, and it's in the American news media, which is shocking. It's perfectly clear that the Israeli army knows this is going on, and they've decided not to do anything about it. That's just obvious. There's no other explanation for this. Again, in each individual case, a
Mhm.
war crimes investigator has to actually go and figure out, oh, the sniper was up there, or the drone came down from here, or whatever. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not war crimes investigators. I was sitting in the hospital when these kids got hurt. There's no way I could know who actually shot each individual one. It's the pattern. It's the overall pattern that we're talking about. And the only other way that someone could possibly explain this is to say that it's the grandest conspiracy of all time and that Hamas is actually shooting all these kids specifically so that Feroze Sidhwa will go write one New York Times op-ed that changed
Mhm.
absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Well, that raises some questions. First of all, it requires a level of just absolutely fanatical racism to believe that Palestinians would allow that to happen. Like you can say whatever you like about Hamas. They are a broadly based political party in Gaza, which is actually the whole reason that when the Israelis keep saying they're going to defeat Hamas or destroy Hamas, or Hamas has to completely surrender and disarm and leave Gaza, that doesn't even make any sense. It's like saying the Democratic Party has to leave the United States or something. It's or the Christian Democrats in Germany have to just go away. That's not a thing. That's not how political parties work. It's a mass-based political organization. Okay,
Mhm.
and you can like it, you can dislike it. That's not the question. I don't think very much of Hamas, but the fact that that is what they are. So
Mhm.
you'd have to believe that tens or even hundreds of thousands of people are joining an organization that they know because they have to know everyone has to be in on this for it to work, right? All 2
Right.
million people in Gaza, every man, woman, and child who can speak, who can verbalize, has to be aware that any time a foreigner is present, you have to lie to them and tell them that this kid was shot in the head by the Israelis, not by Hamas.
Yeah.
Every
Their
single
kids.
person, yeah, their own children, exactly. Now that again, that requires a real level of, I think, pretty extreme racism. But secondly, but then somebody could say, oh, and these are just arguments that I've heard. That's why I'm going through them, even though they think they're crazy. Someone could say,
Yeah.
well, Hamas is intimidating all of those people. Okay, fine. At least 100,000 people have fled Gaza just since October 7th of 2023, and
Mm.
not one of them has said, by the way, it was Hamas shooting those kids. Not one. Furthermore, think of the incentive that those people have to say this, just to lie about it and say it's true. It's true. Hamas shot all those kids. I saw every single one. I
Mm.
think that person would be set for life. I mean, these people are living as refugees in Egypt and in other places. They're not wealthy. They
Yeah.
they can't work. Even if they had a profession or a degree, that's gone out the window. They're struggling. Even they're probably mostly working as cab drivers in Egypt or God knows what criminal elements now. So but still no one has said it because it just isn't true. It's just the simple explanation happens to be the correct one. Israeli soldiers of very, again, like I said, a very small minority of them, but nevertheless quite still a significant enough number, are shooting children in the head. Now, also to be clear about something, the children in
Just a second.
Hmm?
Just a second. Just so to clarify, we're not questioning that Hamas on October 7th killed Israeli
Hmm.
children. I think it was 13 or maybe 20. And by the way, these numbers, like I think Israel killed around 200 times more Palestinian children than the other way around. But I mean, every child's death is
No, no, no.
absolutely
Every
horrific.
child's life matters. No, no, no.
Yeah,
There's no
I mean,
reason for anyone to try and claim. Yeah, no, sorry. I hope that wasn't
yeah,
ambiguous on my part. If it was, I apologize. There is
yeah,
no reason for anyone to try to deny that October 7th was a shocking crime.
right,
Did it have a background? Did it come out of nowhere? No, it didn't come out of nowhere, obviously.
right,
But nothing can justify killing 850 civilians. It's actually pretty hard to justify killing 350 armed people as well, in my
right.
personal opinion. I'm a doctor. I don't really like when people get killed. But leaving that aside, no, no, no. Nobody thinks Hamas is incapable of killing children. They've done it
Hmm.
before. The
And
first
there are, I think there are two videos of them actually shooting a child in the head. I mean, one of their fighters. So
That's
yeah,
possible. I don't honestly know. The youngest child killed, well, the actually the very first thing that happened on October 7th was a car was raked with gunfire by Palestinian gunmen, hitting a pregnant woman, a woman who I don't remember how pregnant she was, but
yeah,
pregnant enough that they when she got to the hospital, they did what's called a push. She was dead on arrival to the hospital, from what I understand. Then they did a postmortem C-section to try and save the baby, but the baby also died. The youngest child, the youngest living child that I know that was killed in on October 7th was a little girl named Mia Cohen. I believe she was 18 months old.
yeah,
Like I could have her exact age wrong. I apologize if I do, but she was I don't remember which town she was in, but her Hamas men broke into the house and her father grabbed her, ran into the safe room, and they fired a shot through the door
mm,
that hit her. I don't know where it hit her, but it certainly hit her and killed her. And it doesn't, when I've told that story before, I've had people say, because people get so people try to come up with any excuse for these things sometimes because there's so much brutality now in the Israel-Palestine conflict. But I've had
yeah,
people who would call themselves pro-Palestinian. I've had people say, "Well, they weren't aiming for her," and it's like, maybe not. That doesn't matter. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter if you fire through a door so recklessly that you hit a child on accident, a small child, and kill her. That's on you. That's
yes,
big boy
yes,
rules at that point. If you want to act like a criminal, that's acting like a criminal. It doesn't really, Yoram Dimstein or I think he's passed away now, but he was Israel's leading expert on international law. Um, and he actually wrote the main textbook on the laws of belligerent occupation. But he used to say, and he is correct, he used to say that there is no, because people would compare is Israeli soldiers shooting recklessly into crowds of Palestinians demonstrating during the Intifada to
yeah,
suicide bombings, and the Israeli spokespeople or people again who call themselves pro-Israel would say, no, 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 it's a total difference. We're not trying to kill the and Dinstein said, look, under international law, there is no difference between so recklessly firing your weapon that you kill
mm,
people
yeah,
whom you didn't mean to kill. And don't even give it a second thought, and then do it again the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day, and deliberately targeting people. It's the same thing. It's
right.
a failure to distinguish between combatants and civilians.
All right,
So
but
yeah, no, I
let's get back to
nobody should
the
think that Hamas is some sort of angelic organization, but
no.
the fact of the matter is they're not the ones shooting these children in Gaza.
Yeah, it's just to clarify that because people don't know you.
Hmm.
Let's get back to
Yeah,
to Gaza. How many, like, if you add up the number of cases that you documented well of children being shot in the head or the chest from yourself and your 60 or so colleagues, how much is it? Like, how many cases do you have
it's hard
documented?
to know the answer. So like Mark like so for example, there's two of the people in the New York Times piece and the letters and things like that are me and Mark Perlmutter. Well, we were there at the same time, so we mostly saw the same kids that were shot in the head.
Mhm.
I've never actually gone to my colleagues and said, like, tell me about the kid you saw on day one, tell me about the kid you saw on day two. There are people
Mhm.
doing that work right now, actually trying to get that kind of much more granular documentation. I know when other folks have spoken to other people, they've mentioned numbers even as high as 50 children that they saw a shot in the head or chest. So it's
Mhm.
but what is the number overall? I don't know. But the most important thing in that regard to realize is that we didn't focus on the shooting of children in the head and chest because that's the most common way that children are being killed in Gaza. Children in Gaza are being killed just like everyone else is being killed through bombardment. The vast majority of children are being killed through bombardment. But when a kid dies under a bomb, it's very easy for the Israelis to say, not just the Israelis, but it's very easy for someone to say, well, we didn't. The kid just happened to be there. It's collateral damage. You can't
Mhm.
argue that with the pattern that we described, and that's the reason we focused on it.
So, I think what is crucial here for evidence is your photos, both of the
Mhm.
children, which have not been published by the New York Times because they're obviously, like disturbing. Oh, I mean, that was the reason they gave. But they have published some photos of the scans of the brains,
Mhm.
basically. So, and then people on the internet questions the
Mhm.
validity of those photos. So, can you talk more about this photographic evidence?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, if you like, I can just I can. Do you want me to pull them up and I can share the screen?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Sure. Hold on one sec. Let me just find them. It's been a while.
Is there
So
something
just while
really,
I'm do,
really disturbing coming up now? Just
well,
to have
so
like a
let me go through the CT scan image first because that is less that probably won't frighten people too much
just so
to
people know
see. Okay.
what's coming if they want that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. So I'm just going to make sure I have the correct thing.
Because the photographs to me seem like the crucial piece of evidence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. So here, so this is, let me just put these things on the, well, I have other things on my desktop. That's okay. All right. Just a sec. Okay. So this is, or I guess, hold on. Let's see. There must be a way to share the screen. Share it is not turned on. Send request. I think you'll get a request to allow me to share my
Yeah,
screen. There we go.
allowed it.
Perfect.
Okay.
Uh, so I'm gonna share. Okay, so this what's gonna come up now is it's not really an X-ray, it's a CT scout film, but they basically look the same to most people.
Hmm.
So this is the picture that was published. You can see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the picture that was published in the New York Times. Now, just so I want to be clear about two things. Number one, this picture doesn't prove anything. That's not the situation. This
Mm.
picture, when we did the poll, we used a Google Forms poll, and we also asked people. Do you have any photographic evidence that you're willing to share? This is one of the things that was uploaded. It was uploaded by Dr. Mimi Syed. She's an American working in Washington or Oregon, I can't remember now,
Hmm.
as an emergency doctor. Now, the New York Times put this at the front of the piece, like at the very top, as an attention getter. This X-ray is not referenced anywhere in the piece. It is not mentioned anywhere, precisely because it does not prove anything. And I didn't
Mm.
even know it existed until the Times piece was published. So whether or not this is real even if you could prove that this was fake, which I'm going to prove it's real right now. But even if you could prove it's fake, it wouldn't matter. That would have nothing to do with the testimony that everybody gave. But regardless of that, the so this is a side what we call it a lateral facing X-ray. It's really a CT scout film. So this is what happened. This is the first thing that happens when you put somebody into a CT scanner. The machine takes a two-dimensional image so that you can tell it. I want you to. Can you see my mouse while I'm waving it around?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, great. So that you can tell it, I want you to scan from here down to here because that includes the entire brain, right? But
Hmm.
even, and what's shocking that even there were people who claim to be radiologists on the internet, claiming that they can tell this picture is fake by looking at it. It's actually unusual how much evidence there is in this single photo just to show, like, it's very unusual for a 2D image, and it just happens to have been that way. This is, you can see this is a bullet here right now. This is a 2D image. So the bullet could just be taped to the outside of the kid's head. There's
Right.
no physical reason it couldn't be. But look over here. Right here, you can see this is called the frontal sinus. And you can see right here and right here. See that defect in it? Especially right here. It's a little bit more obvious. There's a little break in the
Hmm.
bone right there. There's actually
Yeah.
two little fragments of bone right here and right here. And then you can actually see right here as well. See how the bone angulates this way? It's coming up nice and smoothly, and then it juts to the right a little bit. That is a fracture in the frontal sinus. What the bullet has done is gone from here posteriorly, and now so that's only the 2D image. Dr. Syed actually had the entire thing, the entire CT scan. Now, of course, it's just a video taken on her phone, because that's all the tech we had available. But now let me show you the. Actually, let me see. I'm going to put the whole desktop up. You can see the desktop now.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Let me. Can this go away somehow? How do I make this move? Okay, there we go. All right. So again, this is the CT on the CT scan on the left. It's the full what we call axial cuts are going to, I'm going to show you that, but just keep in mind this is the two-dimensional image that was published and that people claimed was faked. There's sound in this, but it's nothing gory. So I'm going to just let it go all the way through first.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Wow. At the same time looks beautiful, but then of course terrifying.
Okay, so that's the CT scan. So let me just, I know people aren't used to looking at these things, so let me just explain what you're seeing. This This is the base of the skull. So this cut is taken from right here, basically, a little bit higher, maybe right here.
Yeah.
Now, the scan is going to proceed upwards, like towards the top of the patient's head. Sorry, I know the video makes it shaky, but so now the first thing you can see, again, probably not to your eye, but certainly to mine, there's a small subdural hematoma right here, and it's actually extending along the right side of the falx cerebri. Or excuse me, the right tentorium, not the folks. You can see that subdural is actually extending over to here. That's what this like little discoloration, this little line of discoloration that you'll see that'll get a lot worse.
Hmm.
Here you can see the subdural much more prominently. See this different color right here? This is blood between her skull and her brain. And you can see the
Hmm.
very tip of the bullet right here. See how small the tip is? It matches perfectly with the tip of the bullet being facing downward. As we go up, the bullet will widen up and you can start to see the scatter artifact from all the metal in it. You can see the subdural over here is still quite prominent and large. Going up further. So now we're probably right at about this level in the CT scan.
Hmm.
Oh, sorry.
And this girl is a girl, right?
She's I forget if she's 4 or 5 years old. Her name's Mira.
And
She's
she
actually
died.
alive. No, she's actually alive. I
Wow.
assumed she had died based on this, but no, she's actually alive, which I was shocked to learn. But so then right here,
Wow.
this
That's good to hear.
yeah, no, it's quite amazing actually. Children are
Yeah.
kids are incredible. So
Oof.
so right now the CT scan cut is right here, right above that fracture that I was pointing at to you before.
Hmm.
Going to go down a little bit back towards the base of the skull, the bottom of the skull, away from the top. You can see the defect in the skull right here. That's this little defect right here. It's much more obvious on the three-dimensional imaging. You can see blood. This is subarachnoid hemorrhage, these bright white spots here, and there's a little bit here as well. And then coming back down, you can see the track of the bullet. That's what all that bright white blood with a little bit of air in it is. And then it leads directly to the bullet, exactly where you would expect it to be. So this, like, when people were claiming, including again people who at least said that they were doctors on the internet, and
Mhm.
two people who I actually know, like, I'll tell you, there were two. There was a I forget which institutions they worked at, but there was a trauma. They were at academic institutions, so they really should know what they're talking about.
Mhm.
One was a trauma surgeon and one was a radiologist, and both of them claimed that it was not only were these images faked, but it was trivially obvious that they were faked, which is just insane. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And furthermore, neither one of their I pointed this out to both of their institutions. Neither one of them did anything. Doctors lying on the internet is now fine. That's
Mhm.
pretty shocking. I was kind of surprised by
And you
that.
would say a
Um,
doctor would really have to lie to claim that these
yes, there
pictures are
there
not
is
real.
no way.
Okay,
So
because I
one of
couldn't
those people
tell,
was
but I
sorry,
mean
yeah. So
now I can. But
one of those people was in. Oh, sorry. Let me go back to the. How do you stop sharing? Stop share. There we go. So one of those people is an anesthesiologist. I doubt he ever looks at a CT scan, so he could be at least forgiven. But then you wonder
mm,
why he's claiming to be an expert on CT scans. But the other one is
right.
a trauma surgeon. If a trauma surgeon can't tell that that scout film is real and then can't tell that the CT scan is real, he needs to lose his job. I mean, I mean that literally. That means he is incompetent,
Right.
shockingly so. And furthermore, I'll tell you, he's not just a trauma surgeon; he's the director of trauma at that hospital.
And the New York
That's
Times,
pretty shocking.
when confronted with these claims that they're fake, they also put out a statement that they
Hmm.
are real.
Not
Because
only
I
did they,
think
so
people will also believe the New York Times on this one.
maybe. So it was it was an interesting thing because again, like I said, I didn't even know these images existed until the piece was actually on their website.
Mm,
Um, which is fine. That's how that's normal for it's normal for you, like you maybe you've written for a newspaper before, but like there's a headline editor, there's a copy, like there's a layout
of
editor,
course.
there's people who put all this stuff together, and like I just wrote the text and interviewed people and put the
Yeah.
poll together.
The pictures
That's
are
what I
always
did.
put up by the editors. Yeah, and
Yeah,
this
they
is a
they
good
chose
picture.
things that they thought would drive clicks to the thing because that's what they're after, right? That's
Right.
and that's fine. It's not good or bad. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
So that's fine. But they were very careful. Actually, they were very sensible because when this got put up, and people said, "Oh, look, these X-rays are faked." Again, they're not X-rays, but that's just how people said it. These X-rays are faked. I said, "Oh shit." Like this is going to be why did they choose this? But they're very smart. I got to tell you, the New York Times people that I worked with, especially the visual opinion team that I worked with, Jeremy Ashkenazis and others, very smart, very dedicated, very professional, um, uh, very willing to listen to my expertise, which I was actually kind of surprised by, to be honest. Um, but they were, and they said, "Oh, no, Feroze, don't worry, we already sent this and the full CT scan, and and also if people want to see pictures of this poor little girl's skull with a hole in it, I can show them. I don't think it adds very much, to be honest, but if you think people will benefit from it, I'm happy to show you the but he said, yeah, no, Feroze, don't worry. We sent this to a pediatric radiologist specifically, which again is just unnecessary. Anybody in their third year of medical school should be able to tell you that these pictures are real, but whatever, go to the experts. And a pediatric trauma expert. So I said, oh, okay, good. So that's cool. So they did that before even publishing the piece, right? After all this nonsense came out on Twitter, and apparently some of it was even in the New York Times editorial room, like the more I won't say who their names are because I'm not supposed to know, but the more conservative people who write the opinion columns for the New York Times, they were claiming that these are fake. Now, of course, these people don't have the slightest idea what they're talking about,
Yeah.
but that's their business. But so there was a lot of pressure, in other words, on the Times to prove that no, we didn't screw up here. Like because now it's a question of their professional reputation, right? Because the Times has this, it's a difficult position for them to be in. I actually kind of feel bad for them. They want to be the leading edge, like the cutting edge of news, right? Like, but at the same time, they have this commitment to their commitments. So, but anyway, so they say so. Not only did they didn't just say, no, these are real, everybody leave us alone. They sent this, they sent these images to a new round, a completely different set of radiologists and surgeons and whoever else. And even they said, yeah, no, of course, no reason to think these things are faked. So that was just, it was this just big brouhaha for no reason. But like I said, if you think people would benefit from seeing the picture of Mira with the hole in her skull, I'm happy to show it to you. It's actually not terribly graphic, but it is a little girl with a hole in her head.
No, I think by now I hope that our audience, they're inclined to believe us anyway, most of them. But I think most people, even if they were skeptical, they would believe that now that those images are real. The other thing you could say now is, well, couldn't you go to any war zone
Mhm.
and have some number of like pictures like that if you would do the
Mhm.
scans and you would do that work? And I'm sure to some degree that's true. I'm sure there are pictures like that from Ukraine,
100%. Yeah.
Kashmir,
Oh,
Ethiopia.
absolutely there are. Oh,
First of
absolutely no
all,
question. No question
first of all,
about
in all these
whatsoever.
cases, it's horrible, and but it could be like let's say if it would just be like a dozen cases, it could
Hmm.
just be like random stray bullets. It means it could
Hmm.
still be consistent with the idea that Israel is trying to minimize civilian casualties. I mean, which I don't believe in a second. But I mean, in Germany, many people still believe that, especially the elites.
Oh yeah, I bet.
So
So
they
it
are very
definitely
skeptical.
if it yeah, so if it was a few cases, I 100% agree with you. And then I
Yeah.
wouldn't have focused on it, right? I 100% agree with you. I don't want people to think I'm here. I just so people understand, I'm not Arab, I'm not Palestinian, I'm not Christian, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Muslim. My family is from a small ethnic minority in India and Pakistan.
Mhm.
They immigrated to the States. I was born here. English is the only language I speak. I have no religious preference whatsoever.
Mhm.
I don't have any like ethnic connection to this conflict or religious connection at all. Um,
And you lived in
I
Israel,
don't
right?
have any I don't have any particular reason to make stuff up about this. I got interested in the Israel-Palestine conflict because October of 2000, when the second intifada broke out, was my freshman year of college. And it
Yeah.
was just the big thing at the time. And so, so I ended up sticking with it because I read a lot about it. I learned a lot about it. But and after college, I lived in Israel for a year. I lived in Haifa. I worked with an Arab Jewish cooperative there for
Mhm.
until I went to until I after it was probably the summer of 2006 or seven. I can't remember now. Seven, it must have been. I went and worked in a hospital in Palestine for the first time when after my first year of medical school. And up until that point, I spoke more Hebrew than I did Arabic, which was it wasn't saying much because I didn't speak much of either one. But but yeah, up until that time, I spoke more Hebrew than I did Arabic. So there's no I just want people to know I'm not I am not here and just to be clear, that year that I lived in, it was like in 9 or 10 months, the 9 or 10 months that I lived in Israel, I very much enjoyed my time in secular leftist Israeli society. Now I wouldn't have enjoyed my time in like the right wing culture for sure, or the more kind of proto fascist part of the culture, but the
Mhm.
but I definitely I really enjoyed my time there.
Mhm.
I got to know plenty of Israelis. I'm still in touch with many, especially reporters, um, whom I met then and whom I've met since my work in Gaza more recently. So I just don't want people to think that I'm here to just say like, look at how dastardly the Israelis are. No, kids get shot in every war zone. There's no question about that. Especially because modern wars are usually they're not wars between two big militaries. Like
Mhm.
the Ukraine Russia war is quite unusual in that way.
Mhm.
But Ukraine is a good example or the comparison to Ukraine is a really useful one. So depending on when you do the calculation, but I'll just tell you that since the last time I did it, which is maybe a few months ago, the in up until October 7th of 2023, Ukraine was the deadliest place in the world for children in armed conflict. If I remember right, in 2022, the year of the Russian invasion, and certainly the
Mhm.
most intense year of bombardment of Ukraine, if I remember the numbers correctly, 732 children were killed in Ukraine. Now, there's
Mhm.
39 million people in Ukraine, so it's a big place, and physically, it's twice the size of Texas geographically.
Yeah.
It's a big place, 39 million people, 732 children killed. Now, in Gaza, in the first about year of the conflict, about 15,000 children are known to have been killed,
Mhm.
known, verified to have been killed. The actual number is probably significantly higher, but can't prove it. So let's just stick to what we know. If you adjust for the size of the population, the daily rate of killing of children in Gaza is quite literally 300 times higher than it is in Ukraine.
Wow.
300 times higher. Can that be explained as a normal war? How can it possibly be that the previous most deadly conflict for children is now a postage stamp on the side? It's like it's got nothing to. It's faded into irrelevance from the standpoint of killing children, even in absolute numbers. But when you again when you adjust for the size of the population, the differential becomes enormous. And I just
Hmm.
want to point something out to people. This is hardly unique to that one metric. So let's look at attacks. I know this because I'm writing a paper on this right now.
Oh,
Let's look at attacks on healthcare and compare
yeah.
Ukraine to Gaza, because again, Ukraine was the worst country in the world for this. When I say Ukraine, I mean the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I hope people get that. Um,
Hmm.
so Ukraine was the deadliest place in the world for healthcare workers, hospitals, ambulances, whatever you want to, by every metric,
Hmm.
up until October 7th. Since October 7th, or in the 15 months of conflict from October 7th of 2023 to January 19th, 2025, when the ceasefire went into effect, in that again, if you do the per capita adjustment, the per population adjustment, the rate of killing of healthcare workers is 110 times higher in Gaza than in Ukraine. The rate of attacks on healthcare that obstructed or prevented access to healthcare is 267 times higher in Gaza than in Ukraine. The
Hmm.
percentage of the healthcare workforce imprisoned in half the amount of time is 200% higher, or excuse me, is 200 times higher in Gaza than in Ukraine.
Wow.
Okay, we're talking about the difference. This is why, and you're saying, "Wow," and you're someone who pays attention to these questions, but you
Exactly.
didn't have
Yeah.
any idea because you don't spend your time looking
And
at the UN
I've been to
humanitarian data
Ukraine, I have to
exchange. And
say, yeah, and I
yeah,
feel
yeah, yeah,
for the
and
people
it's
there.
shocking, right?
Yeah.
That is quite shocking. The
Yeah.
it's just it's the differential of what's been done. What something that people don't understand about what is being done to Gaza is that it is quite literally unique in world history, unless you go back to like the Mongol raids or something like that. It's there is nothing that has been done to nothing like this has been done to a population since World War II. Maybe the destruction of East Timor comes close, but Timor wasn't a built-up
Well, I
area.
would say the Rwandan genocide is also in that in many
So
ways in that
actually, so
category.
that's an interesting point of reference. So even
Yeah.
so, there was a UN I forget the exact UN agency that wrote it, but after just 100 days, and remember we're coming up on 600 days of this attack now, but
Yeah.
in the first 100 days, and again, just looking at the Ministry of Health's numbers, which I'm happy to explain why, are a massive underestimate of mortality in Gaza. Just looking at the Ministry of Health numbers, to find a time when a population was killed this fast, you know what their reference was? It was the Rwandan genocide. They said
Hmm.
that you have to go all the way back to 1994 to find a time when a population was killed at this rate. Now, that's
Hmm.
again, I just want to emphasize that is using the Ministry of Health numbers. There's two things about that. Number one, the way the media typically, like corporate media typically reports on the minute the Ministry of Health numbers is the Hamas-run Ministry of Health. Now, leaving aside that that's just obviously meant to make people think it's not reliable, the Ministry of Health in Gaza is actually one of the few things that is run jointly by Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. So it's not run by Hamas. But leaving that aside, there are two major studies, or actually let me mention three major reasons that this is a gross underestimate of deaths. There's plenty more. We could talk about that for like an hour and a half, but there's plenty more. But let me mention three. Number one, there was a study done in the Lancet. It's not really a study; it's like a report, I guess you would say. There's no statistics involved. The researchers, I believe, from Japan, Canada, and the U.S., if I'm remembering correctly, they got the Ministry of Health's entire database. So not the aggregate number, like how many men, how many women, how many children, but line by line, this person killed in this place on this day, name, date of birth, ID number, literally everything. Then they went through social media postings and news reports, like Air Wars does. Air Wars is a British charity that I'll talk about in a second. And they
Hmm.
found that even the Ministry of Health is underreporting even just violent deaths in Gaza by 40%.
Hmm.
Okay, so that would mean today we're at about 90,000 deaths just from violence. So
Hmm.
that's number one. If the people who did that report comparing Gaza to the Rwandan genocide had known that, they would have come up with they would have said, actually, this is much worse than the Rwandan genocide. And again, I don't mean to compare human suffering here. Well, the Rwandan genocide was absolutely shocking. I remember I was 12 years old at the time, and even then I remember thinking, my God, how can things like this happen on Earth? When Samantha Power called it a problem from hell, she just the only thing she's ever been right about in her life. The so that's
Yeah,
that's one thing.
I visited Rwanda. I mean, not during the genocide, but afterwards. And
Mm.
I remember thinking, because I'm German, and I've visited many, concentration camps here. And I was thinking, like, this is the worst since Auschwitz. So that's what we're talking about. And just to be clear, like, we're not diminishing the Holocaust. The Holocaust
No, 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 no.
is in many ways still unique and certainly worse than both
Oh,
in some ways.
100%. I totally agree
Yeah,
with you.
yeah.
The Holocaust is I'll tell you, a lot of people. Actually, I was just having a conversation with somebody on text today, because we kind of we me and the other healthcare workers, so we bounce ideas off of each other, and everyone is getting to the point of just absolute exasperation about what is going on. I have to
Mm,
be honest with you. None of us are. Very few of us think that Gaza will exist as a Palestinian social or political entity in a
yeah.
few months.
Yeah.
But one of them said, I think we should start calling it the Gaza Holocaust. And I said,
Mm,
guys, I don't think that's a good idea for a few reasons. Number
no.
one, the Holocaust is something that is central to modern Jewish identity, and it
Hmm.
should be. What was done was just monstrous beyond anything you can imagine. Um, the level of cruelty, the level of sustained state commitment to this kind of thing is just, it's shocking. It's not that I would argue that what's going on in Gaza is that they're different things. They are both resulting in a horrendous, unconscionable level of slaughter. Uh, but that doesn't mean that they have to both be called the Holocaust. Like that's kind
Yeah.
of unimaginative and silly, in my opinion. No, the Holocaust was it's quite an event. It is something that can still be written about. 80 years later is uh is quite an event.
Well, one
The
difference is the Nazis really tried to kill every single Jewish child and woman they could find. That, of course,
mhm,
I mean, they didn't manage to do so, fortunately. And in many
mhm.
ways, I'm glad that Israel was founded. The way it was done and stuff is another story. But yeah, but it is also important to point out, and we should also be able to say that in Germany, that the Gaza genocide is the worst crime today on the planet, and
Yeah, it is the
probably the
worst
worst,
thing
at
that's
least
happening right
since
now
the
by a
since the
wide
Rwandan
margin.
genocide. Oh,
It is the worst thing, and it is certainly the worst thing that's happening right now. But more importantly than that, it's not like suppose I go to my neighbor's house and kill his family. That's not the worst crime that's happening on Earth right now, but it's my crime, and I'm
yes.
the one that's responsible for it. Well, okay, then I shouldn't have done it, and now I should pay restitution for it. I don't if what's going on in Gaza was happening like on Mars or
Hmm.
in then it has nothing to do with me, and I'll go help people there. Like it's hard to say Burkina Faso has much to do with. I don't think the U.S. Actually, now that I say it's actually not correct. But even if Burkina Faso, which is this small country that the vast majority of people never even heard of, couldn't find on a map. Even if Burkina Faso had nothing to do with the United States, even if the U.S. wasn't involved in the conflict there at all, I'd be happy to help people there. But it wouldn't be an act of moral. Um, it wouldn't be a moral act. It would be a technical. I'm a doctor, so I'm going and doctoring. Fine, but Gaza is very different. And you're Germany as well, but the United States is the crucial funder, defender, armor of this entire project, and it's not just since October 7th. That's a total misunderstanding of what's going on. The
Hmm.
But yeah, yeah. So no, it's shocking. But sorry, let
And
me just mention the other
Germany is
two.
the number two
Germany
weapon
is the number
supplier
two,
to
but
Israel.
in reality, Germany's support for what Israel is doing would be meaningless without the United States.
Of
The
course. Yeah.
just because of the power differential. The United States is just phenomenally militarily powerful. But let me
Yeah.
just mention the other two data points that I was going to say. So there's the Lancet study showing, or the Lancet report showing that, which just required an enormous investment in time on the researchers' part to go through each one of these things line by line by line. The second thing, and I hope people will understand what I'm about to say. The second thing is a statistical study in the Lancet. The Lancet, by the way, is the most prestigious medical journal in the world. It's published in Britain. The second thing is a study of what's going on in Gaza only using the Ministry of Health numbers, which again, like I just said, literally in the same edition of the Lancet, you learn are a 40% underestimate, at least. They're actually, I'm quite sure it's significantly more than that, but leave that aside. A 40% underestimate. They found that using the Ministry of Health's numbers, life expectancy in Gaza has been cut in half in the past
Wow.
15 months, or since October 7th, cut in half.
Yeah.
That is an absolutely unprecedented thing
Yeah.
in the modern world. That is unheard of in the modern period. Again, the only way you can find something like that is to go back to World War II, and
Yeah.
pretty uncomfortable comparisons.
In fact, many people don't
And
know that, but under Mao Zedong and under Stalin, life expectancy grew in Mao's China and in the Soviet Union. And despite huge famines and terrible atrocities and all that,
right.
I mean, I don't mean to minimize Mao's crimes, but
No,
even
no,
under
no, not
Mao
again.
Zedong,
Yeah. Yeah, no,
that's
not at all. None of these
just to point out how
comparisons
crazy
are
that is. Like,
exactly. It's not no comparison that I'm making or you're making, I'm sure,
yeah,
is meant to minimize the comparator. It's meant to
yeah.
say,
I'm
look
not
at
a
how
communist. Yeah,
savage what is going on in Gaza is. No, no,
yeah,
the Chinese, they were, the Russians especially were killed by Stalin. Um, it
millions.
does it's yeah, millions upon millions. It's not to denigrate what was done to them. It's not to minimize what was done to them. It's to point out how shocking what is going on right now in front of our own eyes, and we're the ones doing it. That's
Yeah,
what's important. But then
that is
the
what's
third
important.
third data point that I want to just bring up for people,
Sure.
because again, we could talk about this forever, but the Air Wars is a British, kind of a British NGO and research firm that
Hmm.
looks into how modern wars, especially the use of Air Force bombing campaigns, affect civilians. Now, Air War, they wrote what I honestly think is the most shocking thing I've ever read in my life. Pardon me. You just have to read this report to actually believe that what I'm going to say is true, because no one's going to believe it.
Hmm.
Previous to this report, the deadliest year for children in conflict that they had ever found was Syria in the year of 2016. In
Hmm.
that year, 1,923 children were confirmed to have been killed by air wars in the entire year. Now, Syria is being bombed by Russia at the time, was being bombed by Russia, right? It was a massive, absolutely no holds barred attack,
Hmm.
right? And like Syria is actually a good example. In Syria, everybody knows about the chemical weapons attacks, right? And in fact, they're described as genocidal, which I think is probably accurate. The reason isn't because most people in Syria were killed in gas attacks. That's not the issue at all. In fact, that's not true at all. Most people were killed in bombardments. But the reason people focus on the gas attacks is because it shows what the Syrian government was doing. And it's exactly the same situation as us focusing on children shot in the head. But nevertheless, 1,923 children killed in the deadliest year of conflict that Air Wars has ever studied. In the first 24 days of the Israeli attack on Gaza, October 7th to 31st of 2023, 1,900 children were killed in
Hmm.
24 days. So when someone says, well, and you didn't put it this flippantly, so I don't want you to think I'm criticizing you. I think these are sensible questions to ask. But when someone says war is hell, of course some children are going to get killed. There's so many
Hmm.
kids in Gaza.
Yeah.
You are you're people are trying to dismiss a qualitative difference born of a massive quantitative chasm that simply cannot be it can't be there's no way to explain it other than
Hmm.
that this is just simply an attack on the civilian population of Gaza. Like I want to, like you mentioned, for example, that the Nazis killed every Jewish person that they could get their hands on. That's
Hmm.
true, but it's not true in like 1935.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
The Nazi Holocaust was done under the cover of war. And it's not because
Yes.
Germans are nice people or something. I'm sure most of
Mm.
you are, but the reason
And
is
now we are.
because no, yeah. Well, but the thing is, even back then, the Nazis knew that they couldn't do this kind of thing they needed the cover of war to do it. And this is not my
Right.
opinion. This is the studied.
Yeah.
I would never consider myself an expert on the Nazi Holocaust, but but there are plenty there. There's conservatively estimated there's 10,000 studies of the topic, so anybody can pick one up and read it. But but yeah, so they needed the cover of war. In other words, even back then, and even for this fascist lunatic regime that just made no secret of its love of violence, its love of military supremacy, its love of ethnic supremacy, all this was totally out in the open, but still they could not commit an atrocity of this humongous industrial scale without some kind of way of keeping it secret. That's not possible in Gaza. Even with
Hmm.
just think about how extreme Gaza is in this sense. There are zero foreign reporters in the Gaza Strip. None. The only ones
Hmm.
there are with Israeli troops, right? There are people like, like some guy from the American Enterprise Institute or something who's just going to say Israeli talking points and think he's so tough because he went to war. It's ridiculous. So there are only Palestinian journalists who are essentially ignored in the West. They're not literally, but for the most part, they have no impact on Western coverage of the topic. Um, the only other people there who can speak freely are people like me, healthcare workers who go in and out. The vast majority of whom are Arab and Palestinian, or are not Palestinian, but are Arab and or Muslim, and so they're discounted as well. So there's a small, tiny fraction of people who can actually speak freely, and still, because of social media and just internet access, and because Gaza is so small that people have eSIM access to Israeli towers, they can still upload stuff. It's still perfectly obvious what's happening. So despite this incredible control of the information environment, if the Israelis just start slaughtering people, which they've done, like the multiple flower massacres, the blah 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 blah. There probably will be so much international pushback that they won't be able to deal with it. The Israelis have to live in the real world. They're pretty practical people in most respects. So like what's the guy's name? The finance minister, Smotrich. Or is it Ben Gavir? I can't remember. One of them is in Washington right now, actually, and he just released a statement saying that he talked to Republican Congress people, and they were in favor. This could just be his craziness coming out, but
Hmm.
he said that they were in favor of his plan to bomb aid depots in Gaza.
Hmm.
I mean, like those are his words. So that's exactly how he put it. Aid depots.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we're like again, you're getting back to like the level of Genghis Khan. You know what I mean? Like this is crazed. The Europeans are pretty compliant. They go along with whatever the U.S. says, but there's a limit to everything, right? And furthermore, the Israelis are worried about their delegitimization in the international system. They're worried about the International Criminal Court. They're worried about the International Court of Justice, and the kind of crazier uh, just totally unrealistic elements like Ben Gavir and like Smotrich and the um uh, uh it's just not they're kind of off the wall, but the rest of the Israeli spectrum realizes that they have to live in the real world, and they realize that there are limits to what they can actually do. So far they've managed right now where they kill several 100 200 people a day. No one seems to care. So they'll probably just continue doing that. You also have to remember, since March 2nd, nothing has gone into Gaza. Literally nothing. People say it's an aid blockade, but
Mm.
that's not true. Literally nothing has gone into Gaza since March 2nd. No food, no water, no electricity, no fuel. Gaza is a sandy strip of land packed with 2 million people. It used to be packed with 2 million people. Now it's probably about 1.8 million. Packed with people to the brim, half of whom are small children, most of whom have been pushed out of the only fertile part of the territory that has access to water. And you're blockading the entire territory for almost 2 months now.
Hmm.
They're starving the entire population. This is not subtle. There's no like nobody thinks that you can grow food in Gaza. Nobody claims you can. Nobody claims that Gaza had 2 months worth of food for people. People are starving to death there right now. It's just impossible to actually find them because, again, there's no foreign reporters. And furthermore, just think about what would happen in any other conflict. Any other conflict, like after I got back from Gaza the first time I was on CNN, it was Christiane Amanpour's show, but it was a different host that day. And between everything me and Mark Perlmutter were saying, she would say, well, just so the viewers know, CNN can't independently verify what they're saying, all this BS. And I didn't think of it at the time, but I should have just told her, of course you can't verify what we're saying because the Israelis won't let you in. Of course they won't. Of course you can't. So why are you making, like, if Iran just banned all foreign reporters and then reports started coming out about huge slaughters in Iran, would anyone be confused about what's going on? No. It's just totally ridiculous. This bizarre this just totally bizarre weird standard is applied to the Israelis. Just, and I hate to say it, but it is because of the history of the Holocaust. The people.
I think, if I
Yeah,
may interject,
yeah.
I think it's not only that, it's also this ideology in the West, of like that the good democracies are fighting the bad guys, the autocracies,
Hmm.
because they always point out that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East and Ukraine is a democracy and so on. I mean, in both cases, that's questionable, especially in the case of Ukraine, but that's not my
It's
main
extremely
point.
questionable.
The other point is like Britain, when it ruled over the world and brutalized the people of India and Kenya and Ireland and Jamaica, I mean, they were a democracy. France, when they brutalized Algeria and Vietnam and Madagascar, they were a democracy. So I
Yeah.
don't even understand the argument, because why would democracies care so much about, other people far away who can't vote and can't voice their opinion? And that's
It's
also a big
because the term
tragedy.
democracy doesn't actually mean democracy, and like this is a technical term that just means with us.
Yeah,
We own this government; it's on our side. The reason the
yeah,
U.S. supports Israel has nothing to do with democracy. That's just silly. And any rational person who looks at
yeah.
Israeli society can see, yeah, is it more democratic than like Zimbabwe? Yeah, for sure, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Is it as democratic as Canada? Certainly not. You might argue that it's more democratic than the United States in some ways, to be perfectly honest. But
Mhm.
that just has democracy isn't just it's not a thing that you can say, oh, now you're in it or you're out of it.
Mhm.
That's the level of analysis that you get at like the American Enterprise Institute or the Cato Institute or some BS with these like ridiculous right wing think tanks
Mhm.
where democracy just means on our side. The fact of the matter is, the United States
Well,
decided in the
the Cato Institute is actually pretty good on this on these issues, by the way.
is sometimes not. It depends who's writing for them.
Okay,
but
just to be fair,
but
like,
they are it's mostly out of their concern for foreign spending that they are they're yeah. But no,
but they can be
to be
very
fair,
clear
you're
on
correct.
these issues
The
morally too. But okay,
That's
yeah.
good. Maybe I'll have to read more of their stuff in that case. The
Mhm.
maybe it's just what
You
I've
should, you
been
should.
seeing on. Yeah,
They
well,
can be
maybe
very
it's just
good.
what I've been seeing on social media, which I shouldn't assume is correct. But
Hmm.
the I forgot what I was saying. Oh no,
Sorry.
the fact is the United States has decided since World War II to control the Middle East by force because you can't let democracies exist in the Middle East for an obvious reason. They would want to keep the oil revenues at home and not send it to Western oil corporations. It's just very simple. You can't let there be a democracy in the Middle East. Well, Israel doesn't happen to have oil, and it's also basically a captive population that can be relied on. And the U.S. has made sure that Israel will remain militarily dependent on the United States in perpetuity. Like Israel could have had peace with the Arab world in 1971, and they chose not to. They chose to
Hmm.
continue. They rejected Sadat's peace proposal, and they chose expansion over security for the first, really for the first time. And they considered the offer. They considered Sadat's peace offer. They knew it was serious, and they said, "No, we're strong. Why should we negotiate? Why should we give back land? We're powerful. These Arabs can't do anything. They're a bunch of idiots. They can't fight." Well, okay, fine. That almost destroyed Israel in the 1973 war, but it's just continued like this. And this is why when people call themselves pro-Israel, I support Israel. That's why I want bombs and money. That's you're just supporting Israel's ultimate destruction.
Hmm.
At least morally,
Yeah,
if not, I worry that actually physically. But the
yeah.
this is there's nothing pro-Israel about turning Israel into a Spartan state. It's not even Zionist, honestly. I hate it when people say, "Oh, those people are Zionists." No, they're not. Zionists wanted Jews to have some sort of independent political power in the world. That's exactly the opposite of what's going on right now. Israel is 100% dependent on the whims of the United States. You can
Yeah.
see it in how desperately Benjamin Netanyahu tries to control American politics. He can't actually; it's kind of a myth. But the you can see it in how desperately he tries to, and how desperately he projects that image of himself in Israel. In Israel, it's widely believed that Netanyahu has some like godlike power to control the United States, which he absolutely does not. But it's because he constantly says he does. Well, it's a big problem.
I have a sort of maybe a bit personal question. You don't have to answer it. Um, I honestly, in my journalistic travels that were usually far less dangerous than what you've been doing, but I had to work on some, let's call them medium, small traumas in psychotherapy.
Mm,
I wonder because, first of all, there must be so much trauma in Gaza. It must be like almost the majority, certainly of also of the children, and
yeah.
also about people like you. I mean, because you seem to really have like your shit together. And I wonder how do you do that? Like, how do you deal with this personally? Again, you don't
My
have to
mother
answer.
disagrees. My mother does not believe I have my shit together. I'm 43 and unmarried, so she's very upset about that. The
Hmm.
but yeah, no, for me, so my normal work is as a trauma surgeon, and I work in Stockton, California, which is it's poor, even relative to the rest of the United States, it's quite poor. It's extremely violent compared to the even compared to the rest of the U.S. It's it's a very rough place. I like where I live is fine,
Hmm.
but the patients that I take care of, and I work in the only trauma center for the entire county. We have a huge homeless population. We have a huge number of social problems here. So I'm not actually that unused to um, how do you say it? I'm not that unused to um, dealing with patients who have no resources, nobody who cares for them, are in a terrible situation socially, financially, economically, whatever the right term is, who are racialized minorities, who are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, it's nowhere near at the scale that I see in Gaza, obviously. That's a different matter. But
Right.
that's really just a matter of scale. And beyond that, I've been reading about the Israel-Palestine conflict since I was 18. I'm no kind of independent expert on it, but I'm sure I've read hundreds of books on it at this point. And um, there's there's a great deal of tragedy involved in it, and not just for the Palestinians, but for the Israelis as well. And the first book I ever read on the topic was there used to be these things called bookstores, right? So I was when I was in college, I was at the Hopkins bookstore. I think it was right after 9/11, if I remember correctly. And the second edition of Noam Chomsky's Fateful Triangle had just come out. And this, and I didn't know who Chomsky was, but the subtitle of that book is "The United States, Israel, and the Palestinians." And I said, "Oh, that's exactly what I've been looking for," because everything else I've read just talks about the Israelis and the Palestinians. They're shooting them, they're shooting them. We don't know what's going on, blah blah blah. And I said, "But you're right, but I care." Like, it seemed natural to me. I don't know why other people it isn't. Exactly, but it seemed natural to me to ask, how am I involved in this? Because it's again, I was 18 or 19 years old. It seemed like we were involved, but I didn't really know how, or I didn't know anything about the history. That book is shocking. That
Hmm.
book is utterly shocking. It mostly focus. It's actually kind of important to maybe go back and think about it for a minute. That book focuses. It gives an introduction to the history, which I think is really important because Chomsky was one of the few people on the left who actually spoke Hebrew and was had access to Israeli sources and things like that. Um, at the time, now there's more obviously, but at the time he was basically the only one, or the only one of any prominence. And when you but the impetus for the first edition of the book which came out in 1983 or 84, I think 1983, was the 1982 invasion of Lebanon, which was the last time that Israel had killed tens of thousands of people in one go.
Hmm.
The details are just utterly devastating.
Yeah.
So it's not, and like it, in it includes the bombing of children's hospitals in Beirut, not even during the war, just as a reaction to Security Council resolutions and things like that. Just pure terrorism for we just carried out with an airplane.
Yeah.
Um, it's so when I went to the West Bank the first time, when I went to Gaza the first time, I kind of knew the level of brutality that I was stepping into, I guess you could say. Um, Now, knowing it and seeing it are very different things. But like I think I mentioned earlier, I lived in Israel for about a year. Well, literally the first thing that happened when I landed, so I was 21 or 22, probably 22 when I landed there. So this is 21 years ago. Um, I flew to Ben Gurion Airport, and at the time, Terminal E didn't exist. So the international flights would stop on the tarmac, and you'd get on a bus, and then the bus would drive you to customs. And I was a young single guy traveling by myself. I have a Persian name, right? I'm not Iranian, but I have a Persian name, and I was the very last person to get off the flight. Now, as I got off the flight, it's pitch dark outside. We'd flown from London to Tel Aviv. It's pitch dark, and there's just this plane and the bus waiting. So everyone gets on the bus. I was the last person off the plane. Everyone gets on the bus, and there are two people there. Well, they had like a green lit tablet kind of thing. And as I get off the bus, they literally grabbed me, threw me onto the stairs, and started screaming in my face in Arabic. And I was like, "Oh my God, I literally I thought I was going to be murdered. This is like literally the first thing that happens when I get on the ground." I
Hmm.
was like, I just thought, oh, okay, well, this was a bad idea. I was like thinking, it actually, there was the case recently of the Red Crescent worker who, when he was on the ground trying to avoid Israeli fire, he, this is the video that came out later of the Red Crescent workers and the civil defense workers being killed. He said he said to his mother, "Mother, please forgive me. I just wanted to help people, and now
Hmm.
I'm gonna die." Something like that. And I remember
Wow.
thinking the same thing. It was like, "Well, my
Yeah.
mom's gonna be so mad and so sad when she finds out that I was just killed on an Israeli tarmac." But
Hmm.
that was my introduction to the place. So I've been hit by Israeli soldiers before. I know the brutality of the place. I've experienced it with my own face, and it's not pleasant, but a lot of people actually call me because, again, you wrote a New York Times article and I've been on CNN and stuff like that. So, people can find my name. I have a public facing website. And, so when people get in touch with me and they say, "Hey, I want to volunteer in Gaza. How can I do that?" Other doctors, sometimes nurses, I always, I always get them on the phone and I say, "Look, it's great to volunteer there. I wish the whole world would go volunteer there, but you have to understand what you're walking into. If the Israelis want to kill you, the Palestinians are not a threat to any foreigner who comes. In fact, they're falling all over themselves to try and make sure that you're fed and safe and comfortable, which they can't do, but they try anyway. But if the Israelis decide that they should kill you and that it's beneficial for them to do so, they will do so, and they will completely get away with it. When on March 23rd, the hospital where I was working, Nasser Medical Complex, was bombed. If that bombing had happened literally 2 minutes later, I would have been killed. And because one of my page, I was on my way to a young boy's room, a 16-year-old boy named Ibrahim Barhoum, and I was just going to change his dressings and talk to his family because he was going to go home the next day. And as I was walking down the stairs, his room exploded. The Israelis bombed it. They were quite proud of it, actually. There was no attempt to hide it. And the and so after that, people said, "Oh, they're targeting Feroze." I said, "What are you talking about, man? They're not targeting me. They probably actually tried to make sure I wasn't in the room because it would not look good for them to, they can kill all the Palestinians they want. Nobody cares. But you kill somebody like me, New York Times author and CNN guest Feroze Sidhwa was killed today. That doesn't look good on TV, right?
No.
Nameless Palestinians were blown up all together in their tents. Who cares? It's just not, it's not even, it's barely a story anymore." So these people are savvy. They are very, very attuned to the American media environment. And Netanyahu seems to be kind of obsessed with it. And so yeah, so no, but so I was like, guys, they weren't targeting me. If they wanted to target me, they would just do that, and they would just kill me. It wouldn't be hard. I walk around. I'm not protected by anything. So there's no
But I was amazed after all you've been through that I saw discussions with you and pro-Israel people. And you were so calm and patient and very convincing because of that, very unbiased, and you showed compassion for the other side, for the Israeli victims and so on.
sure.
I was absolutely amazed by that because in my experience, when people are too close to war, like involved in it personally, they tend to become biased, extreme, fundamentalist, and they deserve
Hardened,
some
yeah,
understanding for
yeah.
that because the emotions run high. And I myself felt that often when I was like too close to war and poverty and so on, I becoming emotional and had to learn to detach myself. So
But
it
I think the reason that I can do that,
yeah,
probably part of it is just my disposition. I'm a pretty relaxed person, but
hmm.
or I try to be.
You're Californian,
But
so maybe that's part of it.
yeah, right, exactly. But I think a major part of it is because my conception of the conflict is different from, or not the conflict. My conception of why or the reason I care about this is just different from most people. When
Mhm.
people get involved in this, they want to oh, I love Palestinian culture. I love Palestinian food. I love this. It's like, uh,
Mm.
I mean, okay, that's fine. The Palestinians have a beautiful culture, just like most people. There's no, I don't pretend otherwise. But there's nothing like it, I don't think of myself as being pro-Palestinian. I don't
Mhm.
care about Palestinian nationalism itself. Like I don't care where the borders of Israel and Palestine are drawn. What I want is no, really. It's just not. I don't care where the borders
Mm.
of the United States are, to be perfectly honest. And the same thing with Ukraine and Russia. I don't care where the borders of Russia and Ukraine are. That's
Mhm.
not interesting to me at all. What's interesting to me, or not interesting, what's relevant to me is that my government is involved in committing crimes against people. And I
Yeah.
don't want that because precisely like you said, this is a democracy. I can go run for president right now. No one's going to shoot. I won't win, but no one's going to shoot me. No one's going to do anything. I have zero concern that other than some vigilante lunatic, which, somebody wants to, somebody comes and breaks a window on my car or something. Okay, I'll get another window. The, if some random person decides to hurt me, okay, I mean that can happen in any society anywhere. But there's no, I have no. I'm an American citizen. I was born in this country. I have absolutely, even in this current environment, which is actually quite frightening for a lot of people. For me, it's
Yeah.
not at all. I have no concern that somebody's going to come and arrest me and throw me in a Salvadoran prison. And if they
Mm.
did, the place would go nuts. I mean, can you imagine? The
Yeah.
everybody, even media that's not sympathetic to me personally, or thinks that, oh, why does this guy keep talking about Israel Palestine? He's giving the game away. They would still lose their minds. Like if I was arrested and thrown into prison by the Trump administration,
Yeah.
um, from democracy now all the way over to the even probably to the American Enterprise Institute. Honestly, they would all lose their minds. And that, so I don't have to, I'm not concerned about that kind of thing. So for me, it's just kind of a natural thing to be involved in this. I have a unique, not a unique skill set, but I have a skill set that lets me work on the ground with people directly. And I also happen to have a lot of a significant base of knowledge related to the conflict. Like I've edited books on the conflict for the University of California Press and for OR Books in London and for the Institute
Mhm.
for Palestine Studies. So I know something about it. So I can put that. I can put the history together. I can put my own personal experience into it. I can survey the people or be in contact with the people who have actually been there, who have worked in Gaza's hospitals. Um, and I can do all of that in a way that focuses not on Israel, but on us. That's what's important to me. We like people talk about again, like people talk about being pro-Palestinian or something, but I think that's a mistake. I really think the question should be, what are we doing in the world? I'm not here
Yeah.
to save the Palestinians. I'm here to save the soul of the United States. I think my own country is worth fighting for. I think its ideals are worth fighting for. They've never been lived up to, but that's because of personal failings, not anything else. So
Right.
it's not because the ideals are wrong. It's because the people who implemented them are flawed, and I'm no different. For in a
But when
hundred years,
you
maybe
when you were
some.
in but when you were in Gaza, did you feel like was there something that carried you and protected you from trauma, like social connections and a higher purpose or something like, or did you just go and do your job, right? Or
No, I went and did my job. I mean, I don't. Again, I mean this exactly as I'm saying. If the Israelis want to kill me, they'll just do it. I mean, I don't have any like.
hmm
I literally don't walk around with any sort of. No one is like guarding me when I. Even if they were, what would they do? Suppose I had 500 bodyguards. Does that stop a bomb from dropping? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
If the Israelis wanted to kill me, they could do it in any number of ways. Number one, they could just hire some Palestinian to stab me to death. That would be easy to do. Right?
Yeah.
No, see, I mean seriously. There. It's not like Palestinians. Oh, sorry, it's not like Palestinian society is just full of angels or something. There's people who are willing to kill people for money, and especially to get out of Gaza. I mean, can you imagine
Right.
the? I have to be honest. I wouldn't even blame the person for taking that deal. The To get them and their family out of Gaza would be you know a big part of this is just like deliberately turning people against each other. So it's not that I'm kind of surprised it hasn't happened yet, but yeah, there is no protection in Gaza. The level of control that the Israelis have over the occupied territories is just totally not understood. They can turn off the water in every city in Gaza and the West Bank. They can turn off
hmm
the electricity in every city in Gaza and the West Bank. The level of control it's just beyond anything. They can kill anyone, anywhere, anytime that they want to. And that's not because of them. That's because of again, I just have to emphasize, that's because of American support for what they're doing. Israel is a
hmm
small country. It doesn't have the capacity to have such fanatically detailed military control over a population that's basically the same size as its own. Um, without the support of the United States. It's not Israel occupying the West Bank and Gaza. It's the United States and Israel. It's not Israel carrying out a bombing campaign in Gaza. It's the United States and Israel. And this goes back to the question of the soul of our country. Just March 23rd was the day I was almost killed at Nasser. And on April 2nd or 3rd, I can't remember, my own two senators voted against a restriction of offensive weapons to Israel. They didn't
hmm
contact me. They didn't reach out and say, "What do you think of this only guy who's from our state who was just almost killed in Gaza?" No, I mean really like and
Yeah.
furthermore, I am a state and excuse me, not a state. I'm a county and federal employee. I work for
hmm
my county government as a trauma surgeon here at San Joaquin General Hospital, and I work as a federal employee for the Northern California VA system.
hmm
I have a forward-facing website. Anybody can email me. No, no, anybody could reach out. They didn't. They don't care. So that tells you something about us. It tells you like the United States is not doing these things to keep us safe. It's doing it to enhance its own power and prestige. That's pretty typical imperial behavior.
And it was just to be clear, because we haven't talked about that so far. Like uh, we don't have much time left, but was it fairly obvious to you that Israel is deliberately targeting hospitals, medical workers, and ambulances and so on? The whole healthcare
I mean,
infrastructure?
it depends what you mean.
hmm
The Israelis. So uh, no one will ever state we are targeting the hospital, right? I mean, that would be an act of stupidity. The
hmm
but let's take that March 23rd example, right? On March 23rd, Israel, probably using a drone, they didn't confirm it, so who knows, but probably using a drone, fired a missile at Nasser Medical Complex, hitting the second floor surgical ward, the men's surgical ward, and killing Ibrahim Barhoum, who was my patient, and Ismail Barhoum, whom they claimed is a Hamas guy that they don't like. Okay, fine. Well, let's look at what does international law say about that? What are the rules, right? And let's just think: would the rules be would these breaches of the rules be allowed if the other party was doing them? This is a good way of understanding what's going on. So the oldest, literally the oldest aspect of international law is the Geneva Convention from 1864. That's a year before the American Civil War ends. So it's a long, long, long time ago. We still had slaves in this country at that time.
Mhm.
That's the level of moral depravity that we're talking about in the world. At that time, 1864, people got together and they decided, the warring parties of Europe decided that wounded soldiers, it had nothing to do with civilians, wounded soldiers should not be further killed, further harmed, and in fact should be provided medical care by either side's armed forces medical personnel or civilian personnel. And that the provision of medical care, including, again, this is specifically about soldiers, not about civilians. The provision of medical care is not a criminal act, and it is not an act harmful to the enemy. It is a basic humanitarian act that is not to be used as a pretense for hurting a physician, a nurse, a chaplain, administrators of hospitals, ambulances. These are all things that are named in the 1864 convention. Okay, and that was these things were obviously expanded on, especially in the Geneva Conventions of 47 or 40 or 1949. This is the foundation of international law. So Ismail Barhum, the 56-year-old guy that they blew up in his hospital bed, along with my 16-year-old patient, Ismail Barhum had been wounded. The Israelis claimed that he was in the hospital for weeks planning terrorist attacks. That was complete nonsense. I'm not even going to entertain such garbage. I was there. The fact of the matter is he was wounded on the 18th to the 19th. It's not clear which one. And that makes sense because that's the 2 days that Israel targeted Hamas's entire political leadership. They're quite open about it. They killed almost the entire senior Hamas political leadership. And they said that Ismail Barhum was the new prime minister of Gaza. The Wall Street Journal actually wrote a good article about it where they said that was a surprise to most Gazans who didn't even realize that his predecessor was dead. But which is, it's just completely ridiculous. What does it mean to be the prime minister if no one knows you're the prime minister? But anyway, it doesn't matter. They didn't like the guy, so they killed him. And okay, wartime, right? But or they tried to kill him. But now there's only two options. Either on March 18th or 19th, when they attacked him, he was a combatant, in which case it was legitimate to attack him, or he was not a combatant, in which case it wasn't legitimate to attack him in the first place. Obviously, the Israelis felt that he was a combatant, so they attacked him. Fine. That means that once he's wounded and receiving medical care, he is no longer a combatant. He is hors de combat. And again, I just cannot emphasize enough. I was in the hospital. This man was not planning terrorist attacks in the hospital. He was just a wounded guy who was receiving treatment. He tried to tough it out at home. And then on March 23rd, he came to the hospital. And when he was admitted, just like an hour or two later, that's when that room was bombed. So the Israelis knew exactly where he was. They knew exactly what he was, how to kill him. This is a triple crime. Number one, it's illegal to kill a wounded combatant. That is universally agreed upon. Israel, the Israeli and U.S. Armed Forces codes agree with that, leaving aside that international law says so. Number two, it was illegal to do so in such a reckless way that it also killed a 16-year-old boy, right? And because there were plenty of other options available. They could have sent a smaller drone to shoot the guy. They could have sent a strike team in to shoot the guy. There was a stairwell right outside his room. There's plenty of other ways of killing this guy. And number three, it was illegal to attack a hospital and wantonly destroy the entire men's surgical ward. They destroyed 5% of the hospital's bed capacity. 1 out of every 20 beds is gone now. So now just ask, if we just reverse the parties, what happens to the analogy? So let's take a concrete example. I forget if it was December 26th or 27th, but in late December, Benjamin Netanyahu had his prostate removed surgically, and he was in the hospital for, I think, 4 days. Now, would anyone on earth accept that Hamas had the right to bomb the hospital, even if it just killed him and his distant cousin, which is what Ismail and Ibrahim were distant cousins, from what I'm told? Would anyone accept that? Would anyone in their right mind say, "Oh well, now let's even take the analogy further"? Like I said, Ismail Barhum was not doing anything militarily related in the hospital because he couldn't. He was just there. He'd only been there for like 2 hours. Netanyahu, by every account, was running the Israeli war operation from his hospital room, right? And this is a civilian hospital, keep in mind. It's in, I forget the name of it, it's in Jerusalem. It's a 1,000 bed, enormous civilian hospital in the middle of Jerusalem that he militarized by every account. Generals, cabinet members, everybody was visiting him specifically for the purpose of keeping the war going under his direction. That is
Mhm.
clear as day militarization of a hospital. Still, would anyone accept the crazed and insane idea that Hamas has the right to blow him up in that hospital? No one would
Mhm.
accept this.
Yes.
That's it's crazed. It's completely insane. Leaving aside that the prime minister of a country is not usually considered a military target, that's a different matter. But you see what I'm saying? Like this, so are they targeting the hospital or are they just targeting Ibrahim Barhoum and the hospital is such an irrelevant consideration to them? Just the same way that these children that they're shooting and blowing up are might as well be ants. It's not that they want to kill children; it's just that they don't really care if they get in the way. Well, it
Mhm.
doesn't really matter which one it is. Like I think we already mentioned Yoram Dimstein's statement that killing people recklessly and with wanton disregard for a distinction between civilians and combatants is the same thing as targeting them. There's just no difference under international law between those two things. Well, so are the Israelis targeting, were they targeting Nasser Medical Complex itself that day? I don't really know, but that what they ended up doing was destroying the place. Now, you can look at other examples where it's far more egregious, like, say, the Turkish Friendship Hospital, which the Israelis just simply laid out charges. This was just a few last month at some point. I can't remember the exact date, maybe March 22nd or 21st. They had occupied the hospital in July of last year, used it as a military base. In other words, again, militarizing the hospital. And then when they left, they destroyed every piece of equipment, everything. It had never been it could never be restored. And so, about a month ago, they just laid out charges and then they videotaped themselves blowing it up and put it on Twitter. And when
Mhm.
somebody said, "Why did you blow up the hospital?" You know what their answer was? It wasn't being
Yeah.
used. What kind of answer is that? I mean, okay, can I find an empty hospital in Israel and just blow it up?
Yeah.
Is that some sort of legitimate military drill? What are you talking about? And the fact is, no one cared. The
Yeah.
Israelis blew up an entire hospital, the only cancer care center in the entire Gaza Strip, incidentally, an entire hospital.
Mhm.
Did you even know about this?
Not about this detail, no.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
I
And again,
forgot
you
about
are
it if I
someone
read
who
it.
specifically pays attention to this, and you're not even aware of it because it just wasn't reported outside of the country.
This is also
You
just too
know,
much. Like every day there is an Israeli
and
war
also,
crime.
yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to keep
How
track,
much
but
can someone actually keep track of? Exactly.
yeah.
Unless you only want to read, like, unless you're someone who's really dedicated to reading about this constantly, like I am,
Yeah.
and that most people can't do that. It's perfectly understandable. There's just no way. I mean, it's crazed.
Mhm.
Were they when this is the point. The Gaza's healthcare system has been systematically dismantled over the past, what now, 18 months. Were they
Mhm.
doing it on purpose, or is it just part of the overall thing? Or did they genuinely believe that, for even though there's no reason to believe it because it's complete nonsense, did they genuinely believe that Hamas has some sort of presence in every hospital in Gaza? It doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Leonard Rubenstein is the one of the international law experts at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. He wrote a really good. He's a lawyer by training, but he wrote a really good book called Perilous Medicine that people should read. Um, what he says, and he says that he's not sure whether or not so he says it's possible that some of Israel's claims about Hamas militarizing hospitals are true. I don't happen to agree with him. I think they're all complete nonsense. But nevertheless, he could be right. I'm not the world's leader. I don't have godlike powers. It's entirely possible that he's right. But he says, even, and this is where it's important, even if everything the Israelis claim about Hamas militarizing hospitals was true, it still could not possibly justify what was done to Gaza's healthcare system. That's the end of it.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Well, if it's like if the attacks on healthcare workers, hospitals, schools, and children and journalists and so on, if the only way to explain that they would not be on purpose, and I'm pretty sure that many of them are, but the only way to explain that they're not would be, and that would be that basically Israel's firepower is so completely insane that it simply levels the whole Gaza Strip, whatever comes in their way. And
Right.
there is actually evidence for that because the Gaza Strip is
Hmm.
as destroyed as like Dresden and Hamburg, the German cities that were most destroyed in Second World War. And here we are comparing like a part of a country to the cities there that were targeted by the US and Britain, mostly Britain.
Right, exactly. So there's two possibilities, like you're saying. One is that Israel is, or Israelis and Israel IDF, whatever you want to say, are targeting medics, journalists, patients, doctors, nurses, all sorts of all the people that make a society. All right,
Yeah,
you could keep going. Professors, poets. I know you could keep going forever. Water engineers, or that they are firing into Gaza enormous munitions so recklessly that
yeah,
they're slaughtering all of these people and they just don't care.
exactly.
It doesn't matter which one is true. If I kill people as carelessly as I drive over ants when I'm driving down the highway, that
Hmm.
again, that's a criminal activity. It doesn't matter if I
Yes.
say like does anyone care? Does anyone care at all when a Russian missile hits a children's hospital in Kyiv? Does anyone care if they did it on purpose? No.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter. If you're
yeah,
firing at a city so recklessly that you can't avoid hitting a children's hospital, that is a criminal activity. I happen to know somebody, I forget that I can't pronounce the name of that children's hospital in Kiev, but I happen to know, I had one of our translators was there with her daughter. They were fine, thankfully. But it's like, it's not like I think these things are a joke, you know, but that's one attack on a hospital. Just look at Gaza. There is nothing, when people look at the actual level, it's just shocking. There's just nothing like this going on anywhere else. So again, is it possible that the Israelis are actually going after Hamas and are just doing it so recklessly and with such lunatic fervor that they're just also happening to slaughter an entire population? That yeah, it's possible. It doesn't matter.
yeah.
It just doesn't matter. That's not an excuse. You could
In both
imagine
cases,
if somebody
yeah,
said if there was like a week of shooting and bombing after October 7th, and then people said okay, look, we're acting in a rage, we have to calm down. Okay, fine. And war crimes were committed, they still need to be investigated, but fine.
yeah,
A month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months,
yeah.
that's not believable anymore. I'm sorry, it's just not.
And we haven't
It's
even
they're
talked
not
about
acting in a rage.
all the genocidal statements coming out of the Israeli leadership, said in the
Oh yeah,
Knesset, Israeli
there's no attempt to hide it.
generals.
There's absolutely no attempt to hide it. But
Yeah,
again, even just forget that you could say that these are attempts to curry domestic favor or whatever, which is often how these things start. I mean, like look at you mentioned Rwanda. That's how it started there too. But the uh just look at the numbers. Like I mentioned, 25, 24 days of bombardment of Gaza, a year of Syria for children. Equivalent numbers, the same number, 1900, 1923. Look at journalists, right? There was just an institute from the Watson, or there was just a report from the Watson Institute at Brown about this. If I'm remembering the wars they covered correctly, more journalists have been killed in Gaza than in World War One, World War Two, the entire American Indochina War, Afghanistan, Iraq, and the entire war on terror combined.
mhm.
Now, is it theoretically possible that this wasn't done on purpose? Yes. You could imagine a scenario where all those bullets were just fired into the sky and they just happened to hit every journalist in Gaza.
Yeah.
Is that believe? Reasonable people can understand that that's just completely ridiculous. It's obviously on purpose. But again, even if it were by accident, it doesn't matter. You don't
Yeah,
get
they
to
could also
kill.
just drop three nuclear bombs on Gaza and then say, "Hey, we didn't mean to target journalists or children or whatever. Sorry that all of
Yeah, I mean
Gazans
that's
are
just yeah,
dead." I
exactly.
mean, that would be like almost the same thing. And I think the firepower
Yeah.
is actually equivalent to three atomic bombs or something like that.
That's yeah. I don't know exactly how those calculations get made, but
Yeah.
but apparently by tonnage, it's equivalent to about four of the bombs that destroyed Hiroshima. This is again what I don't know how somebody makes that actual that analysis specifically, but again, just look at Gaza City. I mean, anybody can find pictures of it. It doesn't exist.
Mm.
It's not like, in 2014, after Operation Protective Edge, the head of the ICRC at that time, his name was, I think, Pete or something. He went to Gaza, and at that time, 12 years ago now, he said, I have never in my life seen destruction like this.
Hmm.
Today, it's just, there's, like I said, there's nothing even remotely equivalent to this that's going on. It's kind of a wild thing to think about, but there is nothing that matches the intensity and duration of what's being done in terms of bombardment. Like, they just take the atomic bombings, right? Like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They were they were obviously shocking in their devastation, but they were a moment in time, and then the conflict was over, right? Take the bombing of Dresden or Rotterdam or Hamburg or again, dramatic events carried out over time, but each one of them doesn't even approach the level of destruction in Gaza City, especially like the north of Gaza, I should say, like everything north of Wadi
Yes,
Gaza.
the North Side.
Um, the current estimates are that in the Gaza Strip, 90% of housing units have been destroyed.
Hmm.
Has that ever happened in any other place on Earth?
I think that
Again,
I
like
think
other,
that
if you go back to the Mongol raids, maybe, but like
no,
other than that,
actually, I sorry, I forgot about that. I think we have actually the same number of destruction for North Korea during the Korean War because the American bombing campaign in the Korean War was extremely brutal and so
hmm
on. Not sure about that comparison. Could be very interesting to do actually, but
and the Korean War is an interesting one to look at, because how did the U.S. actually accomplish most of that destruction? It was actually by destroying dams and flooding the entire
yeah,
place. An
right,
absolute unbelievably criminal act.
yeah,
Actually, some American military personnel condemned it as genocidal at the time.
yeah,
An unbelievable act.
yeah.
But my point is, again, like, you're having to like involve nature. You know what I mean? Like, you're having to oh well, look, we built this dam 100 years ago. No, we're going to destroy it and flood this entire plain. That that's the level of destruction that you're talking about there. In Gaza, it's been done entirely through bombardment. It's just a
Hmm.
shockingly different thing. The contamination of the environment is just, it's these are incalculable things. And again, it's literally, even if if everything stopped today and the border was open and everybody who wants to go in there was allowed to go in there, it would take 15 or 20 years to study what has been done to the Gaza Strip. Not, I don't mean like, I mean from a physical standpoint, from a political, social, moral, whatever standpoint you want to come up with, medical. Um, it's a shocking event, and but more
And you know,
importantly, and
before Gaza, if somebody would have asked me which societies on the planet are the most have the greatest respect for human rights, are the most advanced, I would have said I don't like the question because all societies commit quite brutal crimes. I
yeah,
would have said Scandinavia, but if they would have asked me about the West and if the West isn't better than China, Russia, I would have said, I would hesitate to answer, but in the end, I would have said, yes, okay, the West overall, is at least a little better in some ways and most advanced, and the rest of the world should
hmm
learn from it. I would have said that hesitantly. Now I feel like, no, we can't say that anymore. Like, we can't say the West is better than China. Come on, China's not doing anything like Gaza. And
no,
I've been to Hong
no,
Kong and been
not.
tear gassed there. So, like, I mean, I don't,
Yeah. No, no. Again, just like we were saying before, everybody, or like you just said, every society, and actually, I shouldn't say that, every government commits crimes.
yeah.
Um, no doubt about that.
And
And
China
China
commits
is
some
a
very terrible
and
crimes,
China's
actually.
commits some really awful, the
Yeah.
destruction of the Uyghurs that's going on right now, and
Yeah.
plenty of others are shocking crimes. But
They are.
most importantly is that I'm not involved in them. You're not involved. The
Yeah.
German government does not fund these crimes. They're awful. And again, if I can help those people some way, I'm very happy to go do so. But
Right.
but I am not involved. That wouldn't be a moral act on my part.
Mhm.
That's got nothing to do with it. That has nothing to do with me. It might as well be happening on Mars. I am in the anybody who isn't a hypocrite goes after their own crimes first. They recognize the log in their own eye, not the speck in their neighbor's eye. That's the biblical definition of the hypocrite.
That's
And
Jesus Christ, a quote by him.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, really, it's and
Hmm.
but it's. I mean, I'm not a religious person at all, but it's a sensible moral standard. If you
Yeah.
can't be, if you're a hypocrite, you have absolutely no right to talk to anybody else about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Um, So when people talk about China this or that, yeah, I don't. It's not that the information is incorrect. Yes, China is committing shocking crimes, but that has nothing to do with us, and we are committing the even if our crime was less shocking than what China is doing, even if it's not, but even if it was, we would still be more. It would still make more sense to focus on our own crimes first. It just doesn't make any.
Yeah.
That's not how the world works. Again, like I said, if I go kill my neighbor's family, I can't then complain that my other neighbor beats his wife. That's
Mhm.
absurd. Like that's just not how anything works. Or actually even the other way around. If I'm not married, but if I were a spousal abuser and then I found out that my neighbor is also, I can't go over to his house and beat him up to stop him from beating his wife and then come back and do the same thing in my own home. That's
Mhm.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's no moral component to that act. That's me posturing. That's me trying to inflect on others. It's got nothing to do with anything. It's got
I
nothing to do with
agree.
moral action. And that's anybody can understand that. It's not everybody understands what a hypocrite is. They just don't tend to see when they are the hypocrite themselves, which, Orwell made that point a long time ago. The nationalist doesn't see his own crimes, and he has what do you say, has a remarkable capacity for not even hearing about them.
All right. Maybe there will be a moral reckoning about this, and well, we'll see. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. It was very informative. Thank you for the interview, and thank you for saving lives in Gaza and Ukraine and in California. Um, I hope we can do this again sometime.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for talking to me, Michael. I appreciate it. If I can
all
help
right,
with anything, just let me know.
sure. Thank you. Keep it up.